So, hi Ben, or should I say Kia ora? How are you?
I'm great, Ahmed. How are you?
Oh, I'm fine, as good as one can be in these circumstances. But look, there's a lot to talk about. But before that, I want my audiences to get to know you a little bit. You've done so much, man, in the past decade that I've been following you. So just let us know what it is that you do, what you've been up to, especially after COVID. Give us a little bit of context.
Yeah, so in terms of the past 10 years, I guess I sort of came from a business background, got interested in technology, started talking about SaaS and cloud about 10 years ago when sort of Salesforce and AWS were starting. And then that was just luck. It wasn't good management or smarts on my behalf. My timing was just really lucky, and I rode a wave around that. And so I've managed to build a kind of I guess, a global presence as a cloud analyst or commentator. But I also do a lot of investing, startups, advisory work, and I'm also a professional director, so I'm on a bunch of different boards. And in terms of the past 3 months, I mean, it's been a crazy time. I sort of feel a little bit bad because I'm down here in New Zealand, and we are probably doing better than any country on earth. So I feel bad saying it's been a hard time because it hasn't been that hard. A bit of perspective is always important, but the past 3 months have been really interesting because in terms of my governance stuff, like every organisation I'm involved with, I'm on the board of, health sector, insurance companies, manufacturing, property, a bunch of different things, but everything has been sort of all hands to the pump. So it's been, weekly board meetings, crisis, all of the stuff, which is really exciting and fun. Other than the fact that it's bad for people. And then things have sort of calmed down. I think there's a really interesting time right now that, as everyone said, as all the sort of the academics said, we'd get over this first wave and then we'd breathe a sigh of relief, and then the second wave would hit and that would be worse. It's not down here in New Zealand, but generally, I'm involved in companies sort of all around the world. So that is happening, and it's really interesting to see. I spend a lot of time thinking about the business world and the sort of ills of our modern sort of capitalist consumptive models, and what's happening with that. And then I think about technology both as a driver of the bad stuff sometimes, but also potentially an enabler of the good stuff. The fact that we're doing this over Zoom, and who would have thought that, people that you wouldn't ever think embrace technology and work from home are doing so. And so really, I mean, it's a fascinating time. And I think the really important thing is that we're living in it right now. So it's very hard for us to sort of step back and think and not think about the fact that people are dying and people are sick and people are losing their jobs. But if we do that, if we're able to do that, it's fascinating. We're living through history being made. And history is always being made, sure, but this is a fascinating time, and I think we are going to, in 200 years' time, people will say, "Wow, that coronavirus thing back then, in the 21st century, that actually changed something." It'll be kind of like when the asteroid hit and the dinosaurs died, or when the Roman Empire crumbled, or whatever. So, fascinating time, bad for a lot of people, but still fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And just yesterday, I was surfing on LinkedIn like we pretty much more than usual do these days, and I noticed a couple of my colleagues, pretty close colleagues, they lost their parents to COVID. It just dawned on me that some people are really going through hardships right now, and we can't imagine what they're really going through. Anyways, there's 3 reasons why I reached out to you, but I got to be very honest. One is that whatever we're doing these days, going out there, trying to educate people, trying to stir up conversations, you did that 10, 12 years ago. I recall I was getting a lot out of your "What is cloud computing" videos back then. I recall that very vividly, actually. The other thing is, you're very provocative. You don't hold back, do you? I mean, you just talk it as is, and we need that more than any time, I would say, in our industry. And the third reason is you don't just talk, you actually walk the talk. And I'd like to talk about that a little bit as well. But first, some people believe that it's time for us to go back to basics. Now, everybody wants to leverage cloud. Everybody is going a little bit too aggressive, perhaps, on cloud. But when I think about the basics, you just, you know, you're in my head, because that's one of the early days, you know, what is cloud computing images in my head back then when I just started my career. So I'd like to know what your take is on going back to basics in the shadow of this pandemic right now.
So it's really interesting, and I think, you know, because I'm not a technologist, I'm not a developer, I'm not an engineer, I haven't got any chops on that stuff, and so my you know, I don't have much capability, but I guess the capability that I do have is to try and, I guess, pass things in terms of the real world, because often in technology we get so focused on technology, and so what's really interesting for me is to pass this stuff within the context of society, humanity, business, and kind of I guess parallel that you know to technology. And so in terms of going back to basics, and in terms of, you know, your comment about me being provocative, I am, and that's not by design. I don't you know, go out to try and annoy people or whatever. I just I'm not smart enough to not you know, I'm not smart enough to be diplomatic, i.e. to not say what I think. So I say what I think. But going back to basics, to me, you know, it's been really interesting. Over the past 10 years, you know, I've spent a heap of time in Silicon Valley, and we've all heard those crazy stories about the startups, often in the consumer space, that are just doing, you know, crazy things, like that company that was making the $300 machine that would just squeeze a juice packet, or you know, like, there's all these examples of things that don't matter. And a lot of social media falls into that category. And so for me, going back to basics is, it's kind of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I mean, we've all been focusing on this top level stuff, self-actualization, and quite sort of arrogant and pompous. But the reality is what's actually important. And I like to think of, you know, if you're sitting in Eastern Africa, or you know, or the developing, you know, parts of Asia or whatever, what is important to you? What's important is clean water, food, shelter, clothing, you know, sanitation, safety, you know, those sorts of things. And so in the sort of in society, I think that the best thing that could come out of coronavirus is all of a sudden we stop being so focused on TikTok videos and Instagram filters, and instead we think about stuff that's actually important. Part of that is equity. You know, I mean, the fact is that I live in paradise. I have, you know, a beautiful house, as much food as I want. You know, like I am the 1%, as most people in the tech industry are, and so anything I say is hypocritical. But that said, I mean, it's just perverse and obscene that there's so much inequity in the world. And so how can, you know, the ideal thing would be, out of coronavirus, all of a sudden we created this sort of consciousness around equity, and we're seeing Black Lives Matter playing out right now, you know, primarily in the US, but globally, and that's a really important movement. But it would be terrible to not talk about the fact that, you know, lives in sub-Saharan Africa matter. You know, those people who, it's not a race thing there. It's simply the fact that they have to walk 10 kilometers to get water to drink, or whatever. So I you know, the equity thing, and then out of that I try and think about that. What does that mean for us in the technology world? Like, what are the solutions? What are the tools? What are the systems that will help drive equity? And I get pretty angst-ridden about the technology industry, because it's a little bit, I mean, evil's a really strong word, but you know, I think about the fact that I'm a random guy from New Zealand who doesn't know anything, and I get flown across the world to go to a conference for an hour, or to go to a meeting for an hour, and an industry that supports that sort of waste, and I'm complicit in that. I'm guilty of that. But an industry that supports that level of waste, just, you know, and still all those companies are making massive profits. I just don't I just don't get. And I think it's really easy to criticize Larry Ellison or Mark Zuckerberg or whatever. And hey, those guys have a lot of guilt to deal with. But the issue is the system which allows that to happen. And so it's a total aside, but Bill Gates is amazing as a technologist and what he's doing with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. But that whole model that you're going to make massive profits your whole lifetime, avoid paying as much tax as possible, so that later on you can give money where you want and have things named after you. And what Bill Gates, what the stuff he does is awesome. But I actually think that it should be society's decision to spend, the tax take rather than the billionaires at the end of their career. So that's my kind of view.
Oh my God, I'm feeling guilty if I'm completely honest too. I am complacent in that too. I do travel a lot, and those conferences that we know a lot goes to waste. And you're right. I mean, we got to go back to the basics of Maslow there. I mean, what do people need right now? They need love. They need food. They need shelter. But going back to the tech business that whether we want it or not, belong to. What do you think is the danger now that everybody's trying to hang in there? Everybody's trying to leverage cloud very aggressively, but not without a good planning. And we can't blame them. They need to maintain and they need to sustain, and cloud technology seems to be the only way. What would be your advice for people who really are about to lose their businesses, their employees, and need to leverage tech so aggressively, but at the same time, they don't really know what to do?
Yeah, it's a really, really good point you bring up, because what happens is we're in a time of crisis. So in a time of crisis, you go into firefighting mode, you do whatever it takes. And so you choose solutions, you make decisions, you do whatever just to get things happening. And that's great because it gets you through that period of time. But the really important thing is there's a point in time at which you need to actually stop and say, hang on, we're no longer in a point of crisis. We now need to kind of do some reverse due diligence. How many of those decisions were the right decisions? Because, there's that unintended consequence thing, and that's unintended consequences in a time of crisis are fine because we just accept that those happen. But it's really important to step back. And so if I think about the organizations that I'm involved with as a board member, a lot of us have been really conscious around, right, we're going to have board meetings every week. We're going to have crisis updates from the CEO and team, and we're going to plan initiatives on a day-by-day basis. And then consciously, we've said in the past few weeks, right, we're no longer in crisis. We're going to revert to a traditional kind of a cadence of board meetings. And technology is exactly the same. And so I don't know enough, and I don't want to get into the debate about whether Zoom is safe or not safe. What I do know is that Zoom works better than any other video conferencing solution that I've tried. And so for the past 3 months, Zoom has been an absolute lifesaver. However, there's a point at which people that have taken up Zoom because it was just a thing, and maybe it's not a security thing. Maybe they're a shop that's on Microsoft Office. They hadn't made the move to Microsoft Office 365. They took up Zoom to give them the video conferencing. Maybe they now want to think about, hey, we do need to move into the cloud, but we're going to do that robustly. And maybe we'll go Office 365 and Teams, or G Suite and Meet, or whatever. That's not a comment at all on Zoom's place in the ecosystem, but it's around organizations being calculated in their decisions. And you raise that really good point that we're jumping into these solutions for the right reasons, but there's a point at which we also have to stop, reassess, and then make some decisions for also the right reasons.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I talk to people on a daily basis, and one of the things that I think should be very interesting. I didn't really want to just focus on cloud with you, because you wear so many hats. You're an investor, an entrepreneur, and people are losing businesses, and more importantly, they're losing hope. And I know them. I know of them. It's it's really interesting to take, yeah, and that's why I said, you don't just talk, you actually walk the talk. I talk to a lot of people on what it is that entrepreneurs need to do right now, and there are ideas out there, but it's very different to actually materialize that idea into actually helping people and keeping your business alive at the same time. So I was reading the news. I came across the Cactus Outdoor that you run, and I thought it was a great example of actually doing that, like changing your model to suit the needs right now, but at the same time keep the business going. Tell us a little bit about that. I think it's a good model.
Yeah, so Cactus is a it's been going for 28 years. We make backpacks and outdoor clothing. Got a factory here in New Zealand, niche specialist brand, and it's kind of, I talked about how in tech there's all this money and there's amazing profits or whatever. It's the opposite of that. It's the thing that, it's the kind of the organization that I'm involved with that I'm not most proud of, because it's real, but it's definitely not sexy or lucrative. But anyway, and so when here in New Zealand we had lockdown where it was essential services only and businesses were closed down, and we had been experimenting doing a face mask, not because of COVID, but before we'd started that, because we do a lot of workwear, and so we decided a face mask was something that our builder customers, carpenter customers would like, and so that was just serendipity, and so we accelerated that. We got a bunch of material. We stood up another couple of factories. We got a dispensation to keep operating because we're an essential service, and pumped out thousands of masks. And I think, like, I would never suggest for a minute that that was smart or well planned or whatever. It was luck. We were in the right place at the right time, and luckily, hats off to our COO who came up with the idea of making masks sort of 6 months ago. So I think it's really important that I don't even get anywhere close to overstating, the brilliance of what we've done. It was luck, and it worked out well. But I think that what I would say is, so I'm a volunteer firefighter in my spare time, and the last 3 months have felt like a fire call, because the world is on fire. And for 20 years I've been trained to go into burning buildings and car crashes and all that sort of stuff, and it kind of felt like that. It was like, right, we've got a problem, the factory has to close down, there's nothing happening, this is a fire, how are we going to put this fire out, how are we going to respond? And I think that, I wouldn't say I have good advice for anyone, but if I have any advice that's useful, it's to be thinking a little bit like that. Don't obsess over the finer details. What we're talking about is war. We're at war with an economic, or with a social construct that puts us at peril economically. When you're at war, you make big, chunky decisions which have collateral damage, but you do them to power through. And so I guess that's my advice. Don't overthink things. Just make moves and assess and change direction if you have to, but just do stuff.
Yeah, we're a lot of us are addicted to overthinking and over analyzing everything. And what a great point you raised. I mean, this mindset of being a firefighter and looking at it as a fire situation and not really focusing on fire. But I know we all talk about this, and it's easier said than done when people are actually going through that hard time. But anything that could help, I think, is worth talking about. Now, I'd like to, when I look at what you did, 9 years ago, 10 years ago, to me, you were so ahead of your time at the time. I can't help but wonder, maybe you're ahead of yourself now. So it's a crystal ball question right now. What do you think is going to happen to the cloud industry right now? Because we didn't know it would be picked up so much, and we would have had this kind of surge. But what are we going from here?
I mean, I think I'm quite interested to see what it looks like in the future, in that increasingly self-service. So at the moment, okay, you can spin up a cloud instance, it's pretty easy, but it's still a technology thing. It shouldn't be that hard. So I'm quite excited. I know there's been lots of attempts at sort of low code, no code development, and nothing's ever really stuck. But that stuff I'm really excited about. So I remember, it'd be a decade ago now, Yahoo, remember them,
Yeah.
had that thing called Yahoo Pipes, which was a visual drag and drop kind of business process kind of tool,
Right.
composer, development platform thing. And stuff like that is really cool. So like what I want is, I want my factory manager in the factory at Cactus to be able to say, hey, I'm going to spend a day playing around with this manufacturing process on this development thing, and I'll be able to get some data from that and change some processes and move some stuff, as opposed to, right, we've got a project, we need a team of developers and 6 months and $100 million or whatever. So that stuff is interesting. I think like I worry about massive, big, monolithic technology companies kind of owning our souls. And I love Microsoft and I love Amazon and I love these companies, and they're full of great people and they're awesome. I just don't know if fundamentally having 2 or 3 vendors for everything is a good thing. Like I've watched Salesforce for 15 years. I went to Dreamforce back when it was a few thousand people. Now it's 100,000 or something. That's amazing, but I'm not sure if it's good. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel you. I feel you, brother. The handful of hyperscales, and I was amazed in the past 2-3 years by the number of acquisitions and name changings and consolidations. It's just I don't think we've seen that before. It was completely unprecedented how everybody just started merging together or getting bought, in the middle. So another question that I had in mind was, look, we talked enough about cloud in the past 10 years. We kind of expected the whole concept to be an abstract foundation for everything to be built upon that. Now, I know you've built solutions. I know you've been part of advisory boards for a lot of solutions that are out there. What do you think is the killer app in going forward that is built upon cloud? A lot of these things out there are based upon cloud, wouldn't be possible without it. But what is the thing that is going to solve those problems that you see? You have a unique perspective, I think.
So if I knew that, I'd be very, very rich. I'm not. So, what I would say is that there's this weird tension. And I think about, my little business where we use a bunch of different sort of best of breed SaaS solutions, but getting them to talk to each other, despite all the hype that it's super easy and Zapier and whatever integrations and APIs or whatever, is a nightmare. Or the other option is you go, the big kind of suite solution, which costs, a ton of money from SAP or Oracle, whatever. So to me, the killer app is something that kind of solves the problems, is extensible and flexible, integrates kind of naturally, and almost like a natural language thing. So I could type, I want my invoices, or I want my inventory to appear on my e-commerce and my point of sale, and some crazy AI somewhere would map that out for me and create the solution. So to me, that's the thing, because it's about delivering the results that people want. So whether it's helping sub-Saharan farmers know when to plant their crops or harvest their crops, or whether it's helping my business sort out the supply chain for making stuff here in New Zealand, solutions that are as close to the problem space as possible. Because I think use the word abstraction, and if you think about technology, there are so many abstraction layers. And if you think about, like we take Salesforce as an example, there are customer relationship management plus vendor. But and they talk about the customer being at the heart and all that sort of stuff. But at the end of the day, the actual customer solution is many steps removed from the whole technology piece. So I don't know what that looks like as a solution, but in terms of what it would feel like from a user kind of paradigm, that's kind of what I think.
Yeah, and in other parts of the business and the IT landscape, we've seen that progressing, but never really getting there. Like we had WordPress for doing websites, and then we had Wix, and then but still not really all the bits in one place where you can actually just put it out there and solve a problem that you have, which is having a website. That's still not really quite solved there. So Ben, we're gonna have to wrap this up, and I really don't want to, because you're such an interesting person. So I remember we were attending a meeting back then when I was new to Asia Cloud Computing Association. Mark, my friend, said, there's a call with Ben Kepes, and I said, the Ben Kepes? And he said, yeah, back then, because in our industry, it was, there were a handful of people really doing the work of education and really talking to people really about it. So what do you want to leave my audiences with? They're mostly very cloud enthusiastic people, or they have a cloud solution, or they're sometimes managers in one of those giant cloud computing companies. What do you want to help us with as the final word of this conversation?
So I think my personal philosophy in life is just try some stuff. You're never going to know what the end result is or whatever, but if this first step makes sense, do it and see what happens. So I think that maps well to the people, your viewers who are experimenting with technology, or they're in business and they're trying to work their way through coronavirus, or work their way through a technology or a business problem, or simply someone who randomly comes across this for some random reason and isn't as interested in cloud computing, but is trying to find their way in the world, as we all are. Just try something. I mean, it sounds all weirdly philosophical, but life is really, really short. The real risk of anything you do is pretty minimal. So try something. Don't be depressed or frustrated that you're not achieving what you want to be achieving. Don't carry on using technology solutions that don't deliver what you need. Just try some stuff. Like like I say, I'm not smart enough to have super sage advice, but a journey of 1,000 miles, right? Just take that first step, I guess.
True. Very well said, sir. And I remember at a conference back then when I was listening to Dave McClure, and he came on stage with shorts and flip flops like he always does, and he said, "How many of you have MBAs?" And we all just rose our hands, and then he said, "You just wasted your time. Go make a business, make some mistakes, man. You're better off failing at your business than spending 2-3 years doing an MBA." And boy, he was right. So yeah, that's a very sound advice. Some of my audiences want to get a hold of you. What's the best way of reaching out to you?
So I'm on Twitter, Ben Kepes, all one word. LinkedIn, the same. So I'm all around the place, and totally this has been really awesome. And I love hearing from people, and it's a big world, but it's a small world, and we're all just people. So don't be shy to reach out.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Ben Kepes, and I'll reach out to you again.
Awesome. Look forward to it. Inshallah.
Excellent. Okay.